So thank you, Dave, for joining me. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about what we're doing. This is my podcast titled Race, Redesigning, Reevaluating, and Restructuring Albemarle and Charlottesville's Equity. So you are the first episode. I will allow you to introduce yourself to everyone. I know who you are, but not everyone knows who you are, so it's fair. It's only fair that I let you introduce yourself and tell the world who you are.
Well, thank you, Tanesha. I'm really honored to be your first guest. I love this setting. I feel like royalty here. Royalty Eats. Go to shop at Royalty. Go patronize Royalty Eats. They're good people. Do good stuff in our community. I'm Dave Norris, and former mayor of Charlottesville, former city councilor here in Charlottesville. Been in town about over 25 years now, so starting to feel like this is home. And been involved in different community things, working on issues of housing and homelessness and other kinds of things over the years. But I currently serve as redevelopment coordinator for the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority. So we're working with residents in our different public housing communities to revitalize our public housing. And so and I've also served as executive director of the Charlottesville Winneba Foundation, and so you and I have some history there. Hopefully, we can get into talk about Winneba and Africa and all the great work that's happening between Charlottesville and Winneba. So I'm real pleased to be here.
Thank you. We're excited to have you. So I just want to start off the podcast, of course, because I'm real big on history and I'm real big on narratives. Then let's talk a little bit about Charlottesville, and particularly Black Charlottesville. Let's talk about the history of what the city has done, basically, to, as I would say, because I'm born and raised from here and I have family here. Let's talk about what the city has done to basically hold people of color down or back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, your film tells a great story about the Black history and Black community here in Charlottesville. So if people listening to this podcast or viewing this haven't watched Unbroken Legacy.
A Legacy Unbroken,
please check it out. It's a great film. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, this is a community that, back not that long ago, majority residents of Charlottesville and Albemarle were African American, and now in the city it's down to like 10%, 12%, something like that. And we have systematically been making this community less and less livable, and less inviting and welcome for the Black community. And so we see it with gentrification and displacement. We see it in lack of investment in Black-owned businesses, lack of philanthropic support for Black-led nonprofits, people in positions, in terms of having the income necessary to live in an expensive place like this. Across the board, it's just the trends are not moving in the right direction, and we got to move that in a better direction moving forward.
So I want to touch on something. I'm reading a book called Decolonizing Wealth, and I kind of shared a little bit of that book with you while we were preparing to do this podcast. And I ran across something that was so interesting to me in that book, and that was the bond ratings, and then the ratings, these ratings corporations that basically rate cities, and how these rating corporations are basically like ran by white men. And so we're talking about this like white male Anglo-Saxon colonialism, right? That we see very often in the makeup of certain cities, especially a city like Charlottesville. When we look at nonprofits, they're mostly ran by white women. When we look at the investment careers, or like the partners in most of the law firms around here, they're mostly white male ran. So when we look at things that really focus on equity or giving equity to people of color in a way that, whether it's venture capital, whether it's philanthropy work, I don't know too many Black philanthropists with a great network. Do you?
No, that's really that's a good point. I mean, and I think across the board we don't see. We have a wealth gap in this country, and it definitely plays out here locally as well. Like for every dollar owned by a Black household, the white household owns 10. So it's a gaping gap, and that makes all the difference in the world for a family, for a household, for an individual. If you have a health crisis, if you want to be able to save up money to send your kid to college, whatever it is, if you want to do something to better your life or weather a storm in your life, if you have that cushion of wealth, you can get by and you can achieve and advance. Mm-hmm. But if you're always on the edge and always on the margin and don't have that cushion, and your kid gets sick, something happens, your car breaks down, you lose your job, you're screwed, and so that wealth gap makes all the difference. And what drives that wealth gap is, access to assets, home ownership, business ownership, all those things you were talking about in terms of, and when we don't invest, in Black-owned businesses, when we don't, there's a gap in terms of access to mortgage equity, access to loans. That book you mentioned talks about whites get approved for loans at a much higher rate than Blacks do, and so this is part of the cycle, that we have to break out of, and we have to think about how do we increase investment in Black-owned businesses, in Black home ownership, in asset building, so that people have more of a cushion and can then advance in their lives.
And the book mentioned that the Fair Lending Act started in 1977, and that stood out to me because I did this research for my film, right? A Legacy Unbroken. And in my film, I kind of talked about right around the time of them raising Vinegar Hill. In 1971, they started a Star Hill project grant for Main Street. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Bell did a series with UVA. It was a project for one of the Black History courses up there. One of the Black students interviewed Mr. Bell. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Bell said that they created this grant and that they had given it to the business owners in the Star Hill community. Mm-hmm. And that it was initially, they were supposed to just put sidewalks and plant trees. Okay. But they wanted the Black business owners to fix up the outside of their businesses. Well, lo and behold, right after they fixed it up, they came and they took it. Oh, wow. And so when you think about 1971, this grant starting that was supposed to get more Black businesses on Star Hill, but they wanted Blacks to have certain assets or equity, right, in their business in order to get the loans, and none of them qualified for the loans because they didn't have the down payment money. So again,
it's a vicious circle. Yeah,
it's like a revolving door.
Yeah, exactly.
You give me an inch, but then in order to take that inch, I have to go a mile to meet the requirements. Right. And it's the same with purchasing a house. I know when I went through my home buying process, I know the problems that I went through. I know what was told to me one time, and then it was something different. And then when I went to try to get a conventional loan, it was, it was so many different excuses. I went to go get help from PHA, excuse at PHA. And so it's like, programs are created to help, but only to a certain degree. And I felt like maybe it was just my situation. I think a lot of people probably were looking at my situation and saying, how in the world did she get so lucky to walk into a house, have equity already? That's not a normal deal in today's time. No. I purchased a home that I already had equity in. And most people don't have that ability. Most people are upside down when they purchase a house today. Right. And I wasn't. And I think that played a major part too, is that a lot of people just looked at my situation and said, well, how did she get this lucky? Right. But I knew the person I was selling the house, so there was a difference. But not everybody's going to have the same success rate, right? Like all of our stories are different, all of our backgrounds are different. But I feel like, to get back to what I was saying, I feel like the 1971 situation with Star Hill, and then moving up to 1977, the Fair Lending Act, it's almost as if history is 10 to 20 years ahead of black people even getting that first step, right? So we're talking about a Fair Lending Act in 1977, but then we completely missed the time during Reconstruction when blacks were doing well.
Right.
And so it's almost as if it was a reverse psychology to hold us back even more versus we're looking at it as if it's help, right? Mm-hmm. But it's really not help. It's really reverting us back to not having our own.
Well, and if you look at federal housing policy from like the 1940s onward, it was completely designed to exclude blacks and enrich whites, you know, and build this white middle class, this white ownership class, you know. So they created these loan programs and these financing programs and these suburbanized developments, and it was all about, you know, putting more assets and wealth in the hands of white Americans largely, because the way they wrote the lending rules at the time were very exclusionary, you know. And then you look at some of the work that Jordy Yeager's been doing about exclusionary zoning and deed restrictions and things. Redlining. It's a vicious combination. You know, you got federal housing policy, which is exclusionary. You've got local zoning rules and deed restrictions, those kinds of, which are exclusionary. You got redlining from banks. You know, all these things combine to completely tilt things in the favor of people who look like me. And so you're exactly right when you say we need to not just like do better moving forward, but we need to undo a lot of the damage that's been done.
Yeah.
And policy has to reflect that.
So I want to just touch on the definition of philanthropy because it stood out to me as well. Mm-hmm. The definition of philanthropy says the desire to promote the welfare of others, expressed especially by the generous donation of money to good causes. Mm-hmm. So let's kind of dissect philanthropy in Charlottesville a little bit.
Okay.
The desire to promote the welfare of others, expressed especially by the generous donation of money to good causes. So me being an African American woman and thinking about, I don't even like to say African American, let me rephrase that. Me being a black woman in Charlottesville, in order for someone to promote the welfare for me, they would need to look like me, have my same experiences, and understand the level of trauma that I may or may not be coming from. Mm-hmm. And I just find philanthropy hard to do when it's white people trying to tell black people what they need, how they need it, how they should be living, right, and how they can be successful. Mm-hmm. Because we don't have the same starting point.
Yeah. No, and you know, I worked in a variety of nonprofits here locally, so I've gotten a pretty good sense of how philanthropy works locally. And you're right, it's not enough time is spent really trying to understand. You know, people throw money at things, but they don't really spend enough time really trying to understand the community, really trying to understand where people are coming from. You know, Holly Edwards used to always say, you know, you got to meet people where they are, you know. And when I started with one of the first nonprofits I worked with in Charlottesville, and I went to meet with Holly, I thought we were just going to meet in her office at the West Haven Nursing Clinic, and she said, as soon as I got to the door, she says, let's go for a walk. And she took me around for 2 hours and just walked all over West Haven and introduced me to all the families that she knew there. And she's like, you know, it's not, you can't just read it on a paper. You got to really talk to people and get to understand where they're coming from, what life experiences, what trauma they've had, as you said. And it really makes a big difference. And I think a lot of philanthropy right now, it's not making those human connections. It's not based on real knowledge of people's circumstances. And a lot of that just comes through relationships and getting to know the community. So we welcome people who want to be generous with their money, but don't just throw it at programs that sound good. You know, this is what a lot of what Nikia Walker talked about in her campaign when she was saying, you know, nonprofits can spin a good game and tell a good story, but they're not necessarily doing good work in terms of truly transforming people's lives. And so who's really benefiting from that? The philanthropist is giving money so they feel good and they're going to get a tax write-off, and the nonprofit is paying their employees some nice salaries and they're looking good. But are you really lifting people up? That's really what we should, we've got to change the metrics. And I know she's been trying, and the council's been trying to change the metrics and look at actual impact in the community. And that's hard to do, especially when so much of grant making and nonprofit stuff is based on sort of that good old boys network. Is like you give to your friends and these, and we need more nonprofits that are rooted in the community, that are run by the people in the community. And I know you and I have talked about that before. It's just, we need more Black-led nonprofits. And it's not just leadership, but it's actually having it rooted in the neighborhoods, in the community, in the people.
I also want to add to that and just say, you also want people who will give money but not try to control.
True.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm real particular on who I take money from.
Right.
And you know that from the
right.
money that I get for, to actually do my film and be a creative out here.
Sure.
Is that I'm very funny about who I take money from for a specific reason, because if you're going to give me money to silence my message or to silence me teaching the individuals that need to learn this stuff, then you're not helping.
Right.
You're hindering us, and you're hurting us in the long run. And so I think we got to get away from that too, because you have a lot of people out here with money who will use a Black face, right? This is why philanthropy is really important, because, and what I wanted you to listen to earlier, because a lot of white philanthropists know, especially these Darden business school graduates, they know if I have the right amount of Black people to face my project, I'm going to get what I need, and I'm going to accomplish what I want to accomplish, even though I'm hurting 10,000 people behind me. So it's like, don't bring 3 of us up, right? The fancy dinners are okay with the dry salads, okay, with no dressing on the table. We get that. The dry chicken with no seasoning, okay. The fancy dinners are nice. But don't bring 3 of us up, and then those 3 have to battle back with the entire Black community. And that's where we become a divide in the Black community. And this is what we need white people to understand. When you take 3 faces of color to lead your project, which in reality is your project, so it's a white person's project, but they lead it with somebody Black. Those 3 people that you're using may be moved by money, and they may be okay with selling themselves out for a couple dollars or whatever percentage you may give them. I don't even want to say it's a percent. It may be as low as 0.001 of a percent that they may get for leading this project. But it's some of us out here that's not going to play that game. We're not going to do it. And we're going to call you out. We're going to hold you accountable. And we're just not accepting it.
You're not interested in tokenism. Like, you want real participation, real engagement. You don't want to just put a Black face on something and then say, well, now we're legit, because it's got to be genuine. It's got to be meaningful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the way Charlottesville operates, let's talk a little bit about Charlottesville government, and we're going to touch on this. May step on some people's toes.
Really?
But
Tanesha Hudson stepping on people's toes? I never imagined that would happen.
I always do it. But for example, the Preston expansion. That was something that was brought up under the last legislative body. Wes, Mike Signer, Kathy Galvin, Fenwick was in then.
And Kristen Sakos.
Yeah. The Preston expansion. Now we know that Miss Vizina Howard walked around in the heat to get 300 signatures. Mm-hmm. There were people at this meeting like Ben Allen from the University of Virginia Equity Center. Mm-hmm. There were different members from different black churches and organizations that was there, basically going against this Preston expansion, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And it passed anyway. Mm-hmm. And so, see, it's situations like that where it was done years before, but it still had to be voted on under the new legislation that's gonna make black people feel uncomfortable, because it's like, even when we fight, being a body, right, mm-hmm. downtown, and we're showing our face and we're showing up and, you know, we're trying to be our own body of government, it still happens. Mm-hmm. And you know, I mean, I get the phone calls from individuals and they're like, why?
Right. Yeah, and unfortunately, I missed the council meeting where that one was discussed, so I don't know what the arguments were for approving it. I know what the arguments against it were, but I didn't really understand, given all the opposition from the community, what the argument was for moving ahead with it. And so I don't want to comment too much on that. But I will say, in general, we need more people to do exactly what Ms. Howard did in terms of getting out and mobilizing people when an issue comes up like this. Because it does make a difference, even though in this case, unfortunately, it sounds like her efforts didn't prevail. But we need people to be speaking out, paying attention to what's going on. And I know it's hard now with Zoom and everything's online and virtual, but that's not going to last forever. Eventually, they will have in-person meetings again, and we need people going to those meetings. I was always shocked when I was on city council. We might have 10 people come to a meeting, 5 people. Now it's a little bit more now after everything that's happened in Charlottesville. But, it was always frustrating for me in a town of 45,000 people that, so few seem to be paying attention to what's happening and what the decisions are, because they really do impact people's lives, and it's absolutely important that people, I'm going to go off on a tangent for a second here, but you can have a presidential election and easily 60, 70, 80% of people will come out and vote in a presidential election. And then you get a city council election, back when you used to have standalone city council election. Yeah, I mean, you get like 25% turnout, and that's considered good, and I guarantee you, if you walk down the street, any street in Charlottesville, and say, name all 5 city councilors, you and I could, because we pay attention, this sort of, we're junkie, we're political junkies, but most people just don't pay attention to it. And yet, the decisions that are made in City Hall or in the county office building have much more impact on people's day-to-day lives than the decisions that are made in DC or even Richmond. And so that's a long-winded way of saying.
I'm glad you brought that up, though, because I remember asking my grandmother, why has she never been involved? Like, what made her feel like her life was okay? Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. And I think we got to understand the age difference in Charlottesville, right? I think we got to understand that we're dealing with a community of individuals that lived through the 60s. Mm-hmm. And so a part of them, they're glad that it's over. Right? Yeah. So they're glad that the fighting isn't really happening anymore. Mm-hmm. And then a part of them, they just want to go to work and pay their bills.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, we can't expect everybody to be as engaged as Tanesha Hudson is, or as some of us have been. But still, just, hopefully people will start paying a little bit more attention and not get frustrated when, if a particular vote doesn't go the way, don't just take your toys and go home. Like, stay involved, and pay attention when election season comes around. Like, next year is going to be... We've got, I guess it's 2 seats coming up on city council next year. That's going to be important, who we elect to city council.
Do you know who's running? Have you heard?
I've been hearing names,
Me
but
too.
I haven't heard anything official. So,
okay.
Yeah. Maybe we'll talk off camera.
We'll talk off camera.
But just pay attention to this stuff, because it makes a difference.
It really does. Yeah. So I want to give you a breakdown of a question that I asked my grandmother.
Okay.
And so we're going to kind of do a little bit of head math, because we don't have nothing to, we can't really write it down.
Right.
and I'm going off memory of what she told me. She said she started working at 11 years old. She's 80 years old. She started working at 11 on the farm. She made 25 cents a week.
Wow, 25 cents a week.
Then her first job, I guess when she became a teenager, because she didn't graduate, but she dropped out, I think 11th grade, she had her first child. She dropped out of high school. She got a job working somewhere. I forgot the name of the place. I'm going off memory here.
That's all right, that's all right.
She made $2 and something a week. No, an hour, I'm sorry. Then in 1969, I believe, she started at City Laundry.
Okay.
And in 1969, I want to say she told me she was making she started at $4 something an hour. She worked at City Laundry up until it closed. City Laundry is now Shenandoah Joe's on Preston Avenue, right across from Washington Park. I used to be a little girl going in the park all the time. I'd leaving the swimming pool to go over to my grandmother's job to get money from her so I could buy snacks at the pool.
Nice.
So she left from City Laundry, I believe, in 1997. They shut down in 97.
Okay.
She started working then at Clearview Cleaners, which used to be the liquor store in Barracks Road now. It was Cleaners right there.
Right, okay.
She started working there. She left from City Laundry. Mind you, she started at $4 something an hour.
Right.
When she left, she might have been at $7 something. Then she took a job at Clearview making $7 something. She left Clearview in 2000 to go to Westminster Canterbury, and in Westminster they started her off at $8.50.
Okay.
Now let's do the math. Now today, 2020, of course she's at the living wage where people think $15 is okay.
Right.
So we gonna just do a little bit of head math here.
All right.
25 cents, $2 and something was her first job. I don't know the name of it. Then up to $4 and something, then up to $5 something, and then of course minimum wage became $7.25. That was mid 90s, right?
Yeah, sounds right.
Then it went up. Oh no, it didn't go up. It still was $7.25 up until 15,
federally it still is.
It's still $7.25, but now she's at 15. So from 11 years old up until today, my grandmother has literally went up $14.75 since she started working at 11 years old, making 25 cents a week.
Right.
So when you look at the gap, when we talk about equity, right, and we talk about jobs paying people, and we talk about the earnings that jobs are receiving,
Right.
if we can do nonprofit budgets, because see, all of this still boils down to me. I'm a process person. The work that I do for a living is all built on process.
Right.
I'm a process person. So when we work on a budget I do budgets for my film, and of course I have to turn them in to you. And when we're doing these budgets and we're budgeting out what we're going to pay individuals, why are jobs not functioning the budget around the people that are making them the money?
Right.
So we'll spend $400,000 in training material or, ethics training, but you won't turn that $400,000 into money to up the pay for your employees that can't even afford to live in a city where they have to work.
Yeah. And the best example of that locally is at University of Virginia, and so I got my start in activism, really participating in some of those living wage rallies, living wage marches back in the late 1990s, and we all wore those little $8 buttons. I don't know if you remember those $8 buttons. That was the goal, was to get up to $8 an hour, and even then UVA said, no, that's too much money, And we had to fight all along the way. And even when I was in office, we were pressuring UVA. You got to increase your wages. You got to increase your wages. And it's been a struggle. And all along the way, they said, no, we can't afford it. We can't afford it. And meanwhile, they're spending millions of dollars on their sports programs, on building new dorms, and all these nice amenities. For
new emergency room.
Everything, right. And they say, but for the people who are cleaning the floors or serving the food in the cafeterias. I had, when I was mayor, I was going to an event at UVA, and this woman, I was walking through Ducombe Hall, and this woman came out of the dining hall. She said, "Mr. Norris, I know who you are. You don't know who I am, but I know who you are. Can I talk to you for a second?" I said, "Sure." And she sat me down, and she's like, "I have been working here at UVA for 25 years, and I'm still making," and this was probably, 10 years ago now. She's like, "I'm making $9 an hour. I've been here 25 years, and I'm only making $9 an hour. And Charlottesville is too expensive for me to live in, and we got to do something about this, So I'm glad that UVA finally stepped up last year under the new president and said we're going to increase to 15. And mysteriously enough, they figured out how to make the budget work, But it was more a moral choice. It was like they just had to commit to it, and then the numbers are going to follow, right? It didn't end up being that big of a budget impact. It was just they were just so dug in, and it was a matter of priorities. Are they going to prioritize the working class, the people that make the university function, or are they going to prioritize all these other nice, shiny amenities for?
And those dinners that they spend money on with those dry salads. You'll pay $5,000 to cater a luncheon,
right?
But you won't give your employees a bonus.
So when I, a few years ago, I sort of took a side track in my career and because I wanted some business experience. So I ran the Charlottesville Parking Center for a couple of years, which was a great experience for me to learn how a for-profit business works. And one of the first things I did was looked at our salary, the wages of all the people, all women at the time who were working. No, there's one guy, but mostly women, mostly black women who were working in the garages, and they're making, at that time, like $8-9 an hour. I'm like, no, this is a profitable company. We can do better by our employees. So one of the first things we did was brought them all up to a living wage, and we got a little pushback from the city on it, but whatever. But I think living wage is essential, and particularly when we get back to the earlier part of our conversation when we're talking about building assets. Like if you don't have enough money to even like rent an apartment, there's no way you're going to be able to buy a house, right? And so and we don't build starter homes in Charlottesville anymore, So we even have people living in public housing now who are paying $700, $800, $900 a month, $1,000 a month to live in public housing. Like a lot of these folks should be on a track to home ownership, but we don't have homes that they could afford to buy, and that's we got to work on that too. And so I hope through this redevelopment process we can create opportunities for truly affordable home ownership for residents who are working hard, who are doing, all the things we ask people to do in terms of, how to get your own slice of the American pie, and yet they still don't have their pie because we've made it unaffordable and unattainable.
So let's shift the conversation a little bit since you brought up housing, because you did some great things back then, and even today you're doing some good things in housing. And I want you to outline the work that you've done in the past and moving forward in the future. But I also want to ask a question on why are we not doing what Albemarle County has done?
Well, I would push back against that. I don't think Albemarle County's done that much. In terms of housing. They pay lip service to it, and they've done some things. But when you dig down,
True.
In terms of producing genuinely affordable housing, they haven't done that much.
So let me rephrase that, because I feel like they've done a lot since the conversation started peaking, right? So they built Treesdale on Railroad. Yep. They built Timberlake and Brookdale. Now, who they're partnered with, and I've been trying to get in touch with William Park myself to see why he's not done any work with, and maybe you can speak to that. I don't know if you've tried to partner up with Park Properties or not, but he's done a lot of work between Albemarle County, Harrisonburg, and other places in near the Augusta County. Outlying areas or whatever. He's done a lot of work in a lot of different places. But why has Charlottesville not built The only tax credit community I can remember Charlottesville building is Hearthwood.
Yeah, Hearthwood, and then there's other like tax credit housing like for people with disabilities or special like the chronically homeless like with the crossings. But you're right. I mean, in terms of like apartment complexes, it's been a long time since we built one in Charlottesville that's like for families, so there's absolutely a lot more that Charlottesville can and should be doing. And people always say, well, we're built up. There's no more room left. Well,
build on top.
We'll build on top, or there's a lot of places, right? There's a lot of places that there is opportunity for development. You just got to get a little creative, But you have to make it a priority, and so and you have to have the right tools in the tool chest. And when I got into office, one of the reasons I ran for office back in 2006 was I looked at I was kind of like you. I was looking at the money, looking at the city budget, going to meetings, and just like the decisions that were being made in city council were not reflecting the needs of the community. And so at the time, the city was spending 4 times as much money every year maintaining its golf courses than it was building affordable housing.
Wow.
It was crazy. And at the time, I was running Pacham, and so every night we'd have people coming into our homeless shelter, some of them working full time, and not able to afford even a simple apartment in the city of Charlottesville at the time. And so it was like, there's a big disconnect here, And so I decided to run for council. My number one goal in running for council was to set up a housing fund in the city, a robust fund, so that we can actually start building more affordable housing and preserving what housing we have now. And so it took a couple years, and it was a long process, and we got a lot of pushback from people that really surprised me. A lot of people, a lot of sort of mainstream sort of liberals, white liberals in town,
they don't surprise me.
who say all the right things, but then when it comes time to actually putting something in the budget that's going to actually build housing for people to afford, they're like, no, we can't do that.
I feel like that's so common in Charlottesville.
Very common.
Like
Very common. Yeah.
We act as if we're this progressive blue state, and we're really a low key conservative red state.
Yeah.
Like we really
I saw
are.
that firsthand. I worked with Jeff Fogel on a policy to essentially decriminalize marijuana. We couldn't go all the way and decriminalize, but to make it the lowest law enforcement priority, to erase criminal penalty. I mean, it was a pretty good idea, and we came so close to, because it was all about mass incarceration, right? And the police will use, they'll go up to a car and they'll say, "Oh, I smell marijuana. I need
Let
to
me
search your
search
car,"
it,
right?
and you find something.
The people call marijuana a gateway drug for users. It's a gateway drug for law enforcement because it gives them that opening to then search that car, detain that suspect. And so if you take that out of the equation, then they don't have that gateway to take it to the next level. And we came so close, and it was the white liberals again who talk the right talk and talk about mass incarceration as a terrible thing.
And we're right back on their word.
And then it's like, nope, sorry. And we even had people come down from law enforcement, not from local law enforcement, but there was a law enforcement association for drug legalization or drug reform. I forget the name of it. And they sent people down and said, no, we don't want to be busting people for low-level things like smoking a joint, And Virginia is gradually getting there. It's going to take a while, but at least now it's
being talked about.
A criminal penalty now. You still get a fine, but stuff like that. It's frustrating.
Yeah.
Because the people who claim to be so progressive, and then when it comes time to actually changing things, then they get nervous and back off.
So when you worked on building the crossings, let's talk about that for a minute. When you worked on building the crossings, did you run into any? Talk a little bit about because listen, we eventually have to revisit this conversation, right? Yeah. When I ride downtown, and I just want to say this just to get it out, but when I ride downtown, I'm starting to see more and more individuals just basically living in Lee Park.
Right, yeah.
You know, just laid in the ground.
Yeah.
Laying on the ground, you know, just.
Right. No, we need another crossings. We do, and hopefully we'll get one soon. But yeah, it was a great project to be part of, and it makes sense on so many levels. To, you know, there's been research done that shows that in many cases it's actually cheaper for a community to put somebody into housing, even deeply subsidized housing, than it is to leave them out on the streets. Because when you are out on the streets, oftentimes people who are out on the streets are very frequent consumers of very expensive public services. So they're constantly cycling in and out of the emergency room, in and out of jail, in and out of detox, in and out of the psych ward, in and out of shelters. You know, those things all cost a lot of money. And so when you put them into housing, not only does it dramatically improve their quality of life, but it actually in many cases saves money, because then their usage of all those public services goes down significantly. You know, we had one guy in town here, I won't name him, but just out of privacy, but he had been chronically homeless for decades here in Charlottesville, had been arrested hundreds and hundreds of times over the years. Good guy, just a hardcore alcoholic, right? But he used to come to Potcham every night. Good guy, like had a heart of gold, but just hardcore alcoholic. We got him into the crossings. When the crossings was built, he was one of the first people to move in. He eventually, he unfortunately died a few years later. You know, life expectancy when you're on the streets it really does impact your life expectancy. But for those last few years of his life, I think he may have been arrested twice. You know, after being arrested dozens of times a year, hundreds of times over a period of years.
So you saw a change in them.
Yeah, like and again, so our community saved money by not having to process him through jail and all that all the time, and his quality of life went up dramatically. So that's why the crossings was, I think, is such a blessing to be part of, and it really has done wonders. Is it perfect? Nothing's perfect. There's always room for improvement, but it got 40 people off the streets, and there's another 20 apartments there that are just affordable efficiency units. So we got dozens of people, chronically homeless people, off the streets of Charlottesville. As you say, it didn't solve homelessness. It made a big dent, but we need more. We need more of that kind of housing.
And you're not even going to solve the crime issue, though. I mean, we have to understand that some stuff has just been conditioned, right? And mass incarceration was one.
Yeah.
And so you're not... I sometimes feel like you stated earlier about Albemarle County just kind of scratching the surface. I do feel like we scratch the surface with everything. We scratch the surface with mass incarceration. We scratch the surface with homelessness. We scratch the surface with, you know, Charlottesville scratches the surface with housing. We scratch the surface on changing policies. I mean, there's some really dumb policies around here. I remember having a conversation with one of the police officers that I remember growing up as a kid, who's locked up a majority of my family. And if he was doing the work today that he was doing 25 years ago, he would have never been able to arrest my cousins, right? Because what he was arresting them for, that was that aggressive policing from that 93 Bill Clinton crime bill. And it's just, it be so much little stuff, Dave, that I think about, just like, you know, like the privacy laws, the Clinton crime bill. Like, we don't really think about a lot of this stuff. Well, we didn't think about it when it was being discussed and when it was being talked about. And now here we are in 2020 living the effects of it.
Oh, it's huge.
So
it's huge. Yeah.
It's like the privacy bill. Does it even exist anymore that we have a privacy law or right to privacy? Because now people have Alexa, and Alexa can hear everything in your house, and you have Snapchat, and it has facial recognition, and so now the application has your whole face. You know, you have Facebook. You can call people, you can chat with people. Like, social media has so much access to our life, and it's like, well, wait a minute. In '99, there was a privacy law that came out. So what is protected? And it's, look, we didn't think about it in '99. And here today, now we're living the effects of it. And now people are talking about it, especially Trump. You want to get rid of TikTok now because everybody making fun of him.
Yeah, but you make a great point, though. It's like we are dealing with the after effects of bad policy going back years, decades, sometimes centuries. You know, you and I have been in the dungeons of these slave castles on the west coast of Africa, where a lot of what we're dealing with now is still a legacy of that institution.
400 years.
400 years. So we've got a lot to undo. It's not going to happen overnight, but we have a lot to unpack. We have a lot to undo. There's a lot of damage, a lot of trauma. You mentioned trauma earlier. There's a lot of healing we have to do, and a lot of reparation. I use the word reparation as opposed to reparations, even though I believe in reparations, but it's also about reparation. It's about repairing the damage that we have done, and part of that is financial, and but part of it goes well beyond just cutting a check or whatever reparations ends up looking like. But it's there's a lot of damage, and policing. I'm so glad now we're finally having that conversation nationally and locally about policing, because it's gotten too far off the rails, and finally now we're getting serious about police reform. People have been talking about police reform for years. Now it looks like maybe, knock on wood somewhere, we're actually going to see police reform.
Yeah,
it's desperately needed.
We definitely need it, and I can't stress enough. I think Charlottesville should have definitely. The Charlottesville Police Department should have definitely did some homework after 2017, because they failed not only their city, but I feel like they failed their oath to office altogether.
I totally agree, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, but I really feel like we still don't have enough answers about
We definitely don't.
What happened and why it happened, and so many people that were in the know they've been paid for their silence, and there's still, you and I were both downtown that day on the 12th, and people who say there was no stand down order are lying, because
they were standing around.
There was this stand around order, but there were hundreds and hundreds of police officers, state police, local police, county, you name it,
inside the park,
all over downtown watching.
And inside the pens, inside the park. It almost was like L shape. I like to call. I don't know why no one remembers them releasing the tear gas in the Wells Fargo parking lot. I could not have been the only person that saw them pulling those pins and releasing that tear gas like that. Like, they literally were like fog bomb, whatever those things are. They were throwing them. The state police were throwing them on the ground during the stand down. I mean, when they called the unlawful assembly.
Right. Yeah.
They literally were just throwing them everywhere. And you know what's even crazier about it that they're not trying to talk about is that they took all the camera footage from the businesses. And they said the FBI has all the camera footage from the businesses. Because I called some of the businesses to see if anybody had caught them pulling the fog bombs in the Wells Fargo parking lot. And they were like, oh yeah, the FBI came in and they took all of our cameras. Like, they took all the footage from our cameras.
Right.
So when an officer opened up to me and was like, Tanesha, we got you on a body camera. You did ask for help. I'm like, oh, so now y'all want to tell the damn truth.
Right.
I didn't believe him at first.
You're in the Hayfie report. It talks about you asking.
But he told me before the report was published that they had me on a body camera.
Right.
And I was like, oh, so I'm supposed to believe that y'all telling me the truth? And then it came out in the report. And had they listened to me, they could have probably saved a life.
Yeah. It was just shameful. And I don't necessarily blame the individual officers, because I think they were following orders. But at a certain point, you have to disobey orders. If you see things happening, that where you need to intervene, they just stood there and watched.
Well, and now today, I'm so glad that you brought this up, because it brings me to another point. Because now today, while they're having this hearing in Congress, right, about protests and Trump sending federal agents in, it's almost as clear as day to say that this man ordered for that to go down that way. Because when you look at 2017 and his reaction to Charlottesville, and you look at his reaction today to Portland, to Atlanta, to Richmond, or anywhere else where there's black protesters, and I've been saying this since 2017, and nobody wanted to listen to me, Dave. The only difference between that March 2017, July 8th and August the 12th, and any other march in America is that no black people showed up. You could count how many black people were downtown in Charlottesville on August the 12th. No black people showed up. But if we would have had support like Richmond, Atlanta, or Portland, or anywhere, LA, if we would have came deep like the Rodney King riots, when the stuff happened with Rodney King, and black people would have showed up, we would have had a different level of policing. And that was my argument. Right. That was my argument to them that day on that part. And that's my argument still. Listen, there's a different level of policing, even right here where we're at on Cherry Avenue. This is a corridor to multiple black neighborhoods. Prospect, go a little bit further down Cherry, over across Elliott, you're at First Street, Fikeville, Dice Street, Fifth and Dice, 7 and a half.
You're right.
Go up Roosevelt Brown, you're right at Hardy Drive. Listen, we are in a corridor of black neighborhoods. The level of policing that we receive in these neighborhoods is not in any way equal to the level of policing that you would see in or on Locust Avenue, or Greenbrier,
Park Street,
over by Walker,
UVA. Well, that came up when we were talking about the drug policy too. It's enforced differently. They don't crack down on UVA students who are smoking joints, but they sure as hell crack down, and the research that's been done now is proving disproportionate minority contact in law enforcement, both among youth, juvenile offenders, and among adults. And so when you over police, or maybe better put, when you selectively police, unequally police, that is going to feed right into mass incarceration, and so so I totally agree. Like, we've got to rethink how we're doing policing, and it's interesting because we've unfortunately had a few shootings recently over at South First Street, and the residents there, they want to see more police, but not heavy-handed policing. They want to see police walking through the neighborhood, just getting to know people, build relationships, and build trust. So for them, it's not that they're not interested in like kicking the police out of their neighborhood. They want better policing, So I think we have to get better and smarter and about how we do policing. I'm not one of those who say abolish the police. I just think we need better policing, and then we also need those other resources. So if you've got somebody in a mental health situation, you don't send the police in to deal with that.
You don't even send Region 10.
Right. Yeah.
I've seen Region 10 issue temporary detaining order on an adult, and they didn't even talk to the person or interview the person who initially was going through the mental crisis. They talked to a teenager or the child, and they go off what that person said without even allowing the person to have input in the TDO, which is crazy.
We could have a whole series just about Region 10.
I know. I don't want to touch on that.
We'll get Myra in here because I have had a long history with Region 10 in my own family, and I'm not a fan.
I think that they are partially responsible for making people worse than what they're already probably dealing with internally.
I don't think, I know that.
Yeah,
I know from personal experience.
I know
they
too.
Make problems. And
mine just happened, like literally like 3 weeks ago, and I was like, "Are you like this is what everybody talk?" But see, it shouldn't. And although I don't want to say that it took for me to go through it to know, because I knew, like, I had a family member that's always been kind of tied to it too. So I always knew. I just never knew the level of how deep. Like, this was a perfectly normal person that they basically, they can make somebody crazy. I'm going to just say that.
Right. And it's a shame because there are a lot of good people that work in Region 10 or places like that. So it's not always about the individual. Sometimes it's the system, the policies, but sometimes it is. There are people there that just need to be in a different line of work because they're not helping.
So we're gonna sum this up. Boo, how long you said we got?
We're at 56 now.
Okay.
A little bit of downtime, so
okay.
Still got a few minutes.
Do you want to talk about Winneba for a couple minutes?
I want you to sum up all of the equitable work that you've done. So I want you to just sum up some of the stuff that you've done. Definitely sum up like the Winneba Foundation and the work that you've done there, and ways in which. And I'll just touch on this really quickly before you start. Things that I've learned from going on that trip is that we have to become self-sufficient, and I think that we need to become self-sufficient because, and this may be backwards, to the point that we'll have to edit this part of it because I feel like I should say this after you kind of touch on it. But I think that trip taught me to be self-sufficient in a way that I shouldn't always have to depend on a job to make it and pay my bills. I should always have a way and a means of making money outside of work, because visiting Africa was so different in that sense that it gave me that push to want to do something else. And I think that's why I take my school advocacy work so serious with helping kids that's being misrepresented and underserved that are on IEPs, because there's no advocate for parents, and most of these parents don't understand. And I just had a conversation on Facebook with a parent that was saying, you know, I have a special needs child. My child isn't getting what they need while, you know, school is virtual. And I'm like, well, who did you reach out to? See, sometimes it's not that the school is not giving us the help that we need. Sometimes it's the school thinking, oh, mom has it under control. She hasn't reached out.
Right.
Unfortunately, the school waits for you. They wait for you to reach out. They're not going to just voluntarily reach out to you, because caseworkers on IEPs are just like caseworkers there on social services. Right. They're overworked and underpaid. Sure. They're not checking in on all those cases.
It's not that they're bad people. It's just, But I really, I know you're here like interviewing me, but I want to also sing your praises, because the work that you've done in terms of educating parents about the resources that are available, advocating, going with them to the schools. I don't know if people know how much you do in terms of taking families by the hand, literally by the hand, into the school, sitting down with staff in the school and saying, please help, do right by this family, do right by this child. You know, that's invaluable work, and I'm guessing you probably volunteer for most of that.
I do. I take days off.
Right. So you were actually losing money to be able to do this advocacy.
Yeah.
And that says a lot about you and your character, because you're right. A lot of parents just don't know the resources available. They don't know how to advocate for themselves. It's overwhelming. They may have had a bad experience in school when they were kids, and so now it just feels like daunting and intimidating, you know, and you really help overcome those barriers. So kudos to you for that.
And it's all about building relationships too. I think a lot of people don't take the time to want to get to know the people in leadership. And I'm just that type of person. I feel like it's almost worth going to the horse's mouth. I don't want to deal with the principals at all. I'm going straight over to central office. And so if you're not getting what you need in the school environment, meaning you reach out to the teacher, no response. You reach out to the assistant principal, no response. Or you reach out to the principal and it's not the response that you want. They got bosses too. I believe in that chain of command that, hey, everybody got a boss in this world. Everybody.
Right. But getting back to how we got started with this, you're absolutely right. Like when we're in Ghana, people are hustling. Like the people are always on the move. They are, you know, from an early age, they're working, they have their own businesses, they're selling stuff, they're, you know, and they are, it is a different way of life, you know, and we take a lot for granted here. You said this a lot when you were in Ghana. It's like the stuff we take for granted, you know, But there, you got to work for it. It's,
they out all day,
right.
all day.
Right. Yeah, but they know how to have fun too, which is it's a great balance. They and so I really enjoyed my times in Winneba, and for many reasons. The other part, of course, is just learning the history. That's invaluable. Is people read about it in a textbook. But until you're there and you see it and you smell it and you feel it and you learn about it, hear about it, it's a whole new level.
I think I got me an adopted family over there or something because
right. Yeah.
They still call me every day.
I'm sure. Yeah, that's the other cool thing is just building relationships, and getting to know people in a different culture, a different continent.
And the disconnect because, and I said this a lot on the trip, like, they never wanted us to know how beautiful Africa was. They never wanted us to unite and get to know each other.
Right.
Because it's something about divide and conquer in the mind of a white person.
Sure.
And as long as you can feed off of that MO, right? And it works for you and it gets you to be at this level in life, then...
Well, what's the first thing the slave traders did with the captives? They took their names.
Yeah.
They gave them anglicized names, right?
Yeah.
That's erasing their identity. They're trying to cut them off from their culture, from their homeland, So they give them a new name. They take them across the ocean. They forbid them from practicing their native religion. They make them all Christians. It's as you say, it's cutting them off from their roots, and I really feel like programs like the Charlottesville Winneba partnership are helping to reconnect people with their roots, and it's beautiful to see.
And while a lot of people feel a certain type of way about the Summer of Hate, I actually embrace it for what it was because it actually pushed me to create the documentary that I created and giving people, I'm big on narratives, and I just feel like if narratives are often controlled by the white society, then Black people are never going to get to deliver their truth.
Right.
And so while it really was hard, I'm not going to lie, it was so hard, and I'm not done yet. Like, I have way more work to do with the Legacy brand, with Legacy Productions. This is part of it. This is also part of my in-fellow residence project at UVA. But I just think it's important that while we have conversations about equity and when we define what equity really truly is, you can't get to equity without getting to our history.
Sure.
And so in order to give us equity, you have to give us our history back because we have to know how great we are.
Absolutely.
We have to know how great we can be, and we have to know how great we were.
Right.
And so it's kind of like we got to go back and dig in the past to move to the future. Yeah. Because if I'm not seeing people that look like me be great, then I'm never going to feel like I'm going to be great. And I know that don't go far in the white community, but in the Black community, it really does serve a purpose to see Black teachers, Black assistant principals, Black principals, Black CEOs, Black city managers, Black mayors, and whether it's male or female. See, I'm not with that whole feminist movement. I feel like Black women don't have no space in the feminist movement. I don't care what nobody say. We've been leading our households. We've been working. We've been making pretty much the same amount of money as our men. And in today's society, Black women make more than a Black man because of the effects of mass incarceration.
It's true.
So that's not really that's not our fight. That's not our battleground. It's not, in my eyes. That's my opinion, and I'm going to stick to it. So I feel like I'm not real big on the male or female thing, but I just think being Black in general and being in a position of power, it puts you in a different space. However, there's a kickback, and I said this earlier. You can't just have 3 people there. And so while we're having these conversations about, well, what does equity look like? Well, what is equity? And where do we start? First off, we've already determined what the problem was. So we know what the problem was and how it was created. And we can go all the way back to the slave trade, to the slave castles, the Elmina slave castle and the Cape Coast. We can start there. But then once you start there, you can start in Jamestown. And then even after Jamestown, you can start at Monticello. So no, you can start at Montpelier. Any of them, right? We can start wherever we want to start. We know what the problem is. However, we also know that places like UVA, Monticello, Montpelier, and any other place or space has a massive amount of wealth that they can generate, even if they're just generating it from investors. That you can utilize that money. Let's take this $9 billion endowment that UVA got. You could use that money to benefit those that you exploited.
Absolutely.
If you really wanted to close the gap on equity.
Yeah, and I don't know if you ever read it's called the Orange Dot Report. Came out about 10 years ago now. Rich Schuyler was involved and some other people, and basically he was making a similar argument. Like, UVA has all these resources, and in particular all this purchasing power. And imagine if it just diverted a small portion of that to buying from Black-owned businesses, locally owned businesses here, hiring, contracting with Black-owned businesses. Imagine if we started recycling more of that money in our community. Imagine what a difference it can make in terms of lifting people up, and so I totally agree. There's a missed opportunity there with some of these anchor institutions, UVA, Monticello, you name it, where we need to see them doing more to support the community, because the health of the community is intertwined with the health of the university. Where if the community is struggling, the university is going to be affected by that. So when we're better off, they're better off.
True indeed. So I stopped Jim Ryan sometime last year, and I asked Jim Ryan about taking community leaders in the community that may want to get a degree from UVA. We also got to look at certain schools up there that don't graduate many African Americans. The School of Architecture is one. The engineering school is another. Some parts of Darden Business School is another. You have to look at how many Black people are coming from those different schools of.
Yeah. And Rick Turner made good progress when he was here in getting more students into variety schools, but I feel like since he's left,
it done dwindled down.
Yeah,
True.
They haven't had that. I mean, there are good people that are pushing this at UVA, but I feel like he brought a real passion to it that really, we saw a tangible difference, and I feel like it hasn't gotten as much.
But then you have a straight funnel from UVA to the city of Charlottesville, or UVA to the county of Albemarle, as to where they're teaching all of this stuff, right here in those classrooms. And then people are coming into local government and embodying the ideas that they've learned, or the ideologies that they've learned, right there at Darden Business School or the School of Architecture. And then they're embodying them in the county of Albemarle and city of Charlottesville. But you have no people of color there to assist you. You may create a board just to get the ideas from them, but in reality, they've stolen a lot of work from people like myself who've done the community work. Right. So they've stolen a lot of work from the Drury Browns or Reverend R.A. Johnson, or all the philanthropists before us, right? But they don't have that massive net worth that they have coming from UVA.
Do you feel like the Equity Center is an attempt to undo some of that? I don't know a whole lot about the Equity Center, but it sounds like it's intended, at least, to try to change that dynamic.
So I'll say that I'm real big on saying this. I think that their heart is in the right place, the people who are in positions of power in the Equity Center. I think they want to do the right thing. Will Jim Ryan them allow them to do the right thing? And will they get the funding that they need to do the right thing? Because it can be great. It can be great. And even if they took 5 local people, whether it's 5 community leaders, activists, or and 5 high school students, and offered a free education every year moving forward, that would be a step in the right direction.
Absolutely.
That could change the equity for those individuals to then turn back and give to others. Right. If the city of Charlottesville started and I don't know if they have this or not, but started a scholarship fund, for city employees' children, right? So the employees, their children could apply for a scholarship that will help them get through college.
That'd be great.
The county of Albemarle could do the same thing.
Sure.
If you really wanted to close the gap on equity, those are the ways in which you enhance it, I feel. From like an educational standpoint, that's one. But then what about people that don't want to go to college? College isn't for everybody.
It's not.
Let's have better access to loans for entrepreneurs that want to get started. Let's have something set where we have to have 10 or 15 Black-led nonprofits in Charlottesville. Right? Like these are things they could put in place that could close the equity gap.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things that we're doing with the redevelopment initiative is there's this HUD, Housing and Urban Development Policy, called Section 3, and basically it says whenever federal housing dollars are being used to redevelop a place like West Haven or Crescent Halls or whatnot, that you have to give priority, or you're supposed to give priority to hiring and contracting with residents of those communities or employers that are going to hire residents from those communities. And it's never been enforced, or very rarely been enforced. But with our program, with our redevelopment initiative, Section 3 is front and center. And the idea is that while we're transforming neighborhoods, we're also transforming people's lives, giving them opportunities. So we've got a training program now where public housing residents are getting trained in construction skills so that when the construction work starts, they'll be hired onto the job and they're going to make good money, and get good benefits. And there's a lot of construction happening around Charlottesville and Albemarle, so it's a good career track. It's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to be a construction worker, but and then also thinking about who's actually getting hired to do this work, who's getting the contracts to do this work. So we've got a Black-owned general contracting firm that's going to be renovating Crescent Halls. That was important to us, that we don't just talk the talk, but we actually put money into it and put like our dollars and our resources and our energy behind it and make it happen, so that we start to close that equity gap, because it's huge.
And while we need housing, I'm gonna end with this, and I want you to just touch a little bit more on like the housing initiative. So for people that don't know what's happening, you can tell them a little bit about what's happening. And we're gonna close out after this. But I just want to touch on, while we need housing, I think it's important that we, stress we want adequate housing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Carlton Views was a rush job. It's not built the best. They have a lot of issues. If you wouldn't live in it yourself,
right,
don't attempt to put somebody else in it.
Right.
And I think you gotta watch and I tell people all the time, stop saying we need affordable housing. We don't need affordable housing. We need low income housing. There's a difference. Because affordable, you have to understand, who is it affordable for?
Who? Yeah.
So stop saying affordable and say low income.
Yeah.
And we need more tax credit properties, because some people are over that threshold of low income. They're almost at low income, but not quite. So they jump the fence a little bit, but they still can't afford to rent in Charlottesville.
I know.
But I just think it's important that we make sure that we're getting decent housing, that it's being built right. And yes, it's all good to hire Black help. I agree with that. But we want good housing. We don't want cheap housing. We don't want something just thrown up there. We want it to be nice.
I totally agree. And one of the things that I'm proudest of this redevelopment initiative is that it's in many ways a resident-led, resident-directed initiative, in that residents have been at the table from the beginning, and as we're choosing the contractors, as we're designing these buildings and designing these neighborhoods, as we're selecting what materials for the cabinets, residents get those choices, and so the appliances, and they're, the interesting thing is they're not asking for the Taj Mahal. They just, as you say, they want quality, they want durability, they want stuff that's going to work and not break down every, few years and need to be replaced. And honestly, I think it's a better investment when you build housing that is durable, that is decent quality, because then you're not having to spend so much money to maintain it, fix it up when everything breaks down. Like Crescent Halls is such a huge cash drain on the housing authority and on the city, honestly, because the city has had to put money into the housing authority to fix up Crescent Halls. And it's just, so when we go in there and renovate Crescent Halls, top to bottom, it's going to be all new everything, all new systems, new appliances, new cabinets, you name it, the water, the heat, the AC, everything, good quality, durable materials that the residents have been involved in choosing, you know. And then also just with the design of the neighborhoods. You know, we had a group over at South First Street, about a dozen ladies who've been meeting every Sunday since last June. Unfortunately, with the COVID, we're not doing the in-person meetings anymore, but almost every Sunday since June of 2019 forward, they were meeting for hours at a time, coming up with the design of their neighborhood. You know, they are invested in this community, and you say, well, a dozen, that's not that many, but there's only 58 households, so 12 out of 58
that's a lot.
Is a big proportion, you know. And so, and it was more, it was like a core group of 12, but there were others that came and went throughout that whole process. But again, when you let the residents have the driver's seat, you know, sit in the driver's seat, you're going to get a better product at the end of the day, and they're going to take care of it, and they're going to be invested in it, you know, and that makes all the difference in the world.
So I personally would love to see or hear why Charlottesville has never partnered with the William Park guy. So I know that he does a lot of like VHDA loans, and I do know how the rural development home loans work. I don't know if it's different for like the developments that he's building, but I know you have to be you can't be in the city with those type of loans. They're like for rural considered areas. But I can tell you, because I know quite a few people that live in Brookdale, right off of 5th Street Extended, they are really, really, really nice.
Yeah.
Inside and out. Those are really nice apartments.
Yeah.
So I just would love to see more projects like that in the future happening in Charlottesville to cater to the people who are often left behind and are being forced out. We definitely got to stop gentrifying. It's way too easy to just gentrify.
It's happening all around, literally right here. Yeah. So it's there's a lot of work to be done, and we need to be thinking creatively. We need to be building on our history and our legacy and undoing some of the damage.
Agreed.
But there's so much potential to do good here if we can just get our act together.
We definitely need to get our act together.
Yeah.
We definitely do. But thank you, Dave. We could talk all day. It's probably going to be a part 2 because we didn't cover a lot of what I wanted to talk about. But the next time it'll probably be me, you, and Sared. So
all right.
it'll be different. Shout out to Boo Ag on the visuals.
He's the man.
He's the man. Boo the man. Boo the man. Boo the man. Look, anybody that can work with me is definitely the man or woman, because like my mind go faster than me, and so my mind be one place and I be another. So it's like I'm running a mile a minute.
That's all right.
But I'm glad I finally got this done, and we're launching August the 12th.
That's exciting.
So
thanks for letting me be a part of it.
On the reunion day, Dave, listen, this gotta go on the record because this gotta be on the show. You are not given the credit you deserve for a lot of the work that you've done. And I think that it's time that Charlottesville understand and give you the praise that you deserve. Listen, people should smell their flowers while they living. Better not nobody wait until something happen to you and then try to praise you, because I'm going to be like, y'all won't doing that today when he was living.
Well, thank you, Tanesha. I appreciate it.
You have done a lot. I think the Winneba Foundation, the work that you're doing there, giving people the opportunity to experience Africa. I promote anybody to donate.
Please do. We take
to the cause because, listen, that's a once-in-a-lifetime trip. I don't think people really promoting it right. I know I be promoting the hell out of it, because I had such a bomb time over there.
Yeah, I know you did.
And they want me to come back. But
this is the next mayor of Winneba right here.
We need to get you some funding for that foundation because, listen, a lot of people should be giving money to that. That is one of the dopest trips. It's one of the most historical trips. I bet you the other sister city ain't doing it how we doing it in Winneba.
No, it's definitely the most active, and also it's the only one of all our sister cities where we actually raise money to be able to help people afford the cost of travel, because it's not cheap.
No.
Flying to Africa, and for a lot of people, it puts it out of their range, their financial range, and so the monies that are donated to the foundation help to offset some of those costs so that people, everyday working people, can afford to go to Africa for 12 days, you know.
And just talk about, just end real quick and talk about some of the work that we've done there. The library.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of projects, and it's not all the stuff that we're doing for them. It's also, we also get a lot out of it too. But yeah, we every year we send a shipment of medical supplies and medical equipment to the 2 hospitals in Winneba. We've supported literacy programs, reading programs, educational programs. We had teachers from Charlottesville go and teach in Winneba. We've had doctors from UVA Medical Center that have gone and done rotations at the clinics in Winneba. We have a micro lending program. A local pastor here, Dale Johnson, started a program where it's targeted at grandmothers who are raising orphaned children over there, and it gives them a small amount of money to start or grow their own business. As we were saying earlier, people are busy. That people work hard there, and
they do.
And so a lot of people have their own businesses. So this allows these women to start or grow their own business, and then as they pay the money back into the fund, it's then re-loaned out to other women. So far, this program's been in place for almost a decade now. They have a 100% repayment rate. Not a single person has defaulted on a single loan, right? So we have the microloan. It's called the Helen Project, the microloan program. We've supported youth athletics programs over there. We're hoping to build a library someday with them, a modern public library. We've had a lot of exchanges back and forth, so we've welcomed visitors from Winneba here. We've sent visitors there. UVA has actually, we've got a professor at UVA, Nancy Takahashi, who's been working on this environmental preservation program with folks in Winneba on the ground there. So there's a lot of good stuff happening, and you know, we've been trying to set up this artist in residence program in our city schools here, where we have visiting artists from Winneba, like musicians, but the fabric artists. You've seen the fabrics; they're beautiful fabrics. Sculptors, you name it, come and teach West African cultural traditions to our city school children. That program was fully funded, everything was put into place, and then the first 2 artists that were planning to come couldn't get visas. And the U.S. is really cracking down on, particularly under Trump, have been really cracking down on visitors coming from Africa to the U.S. because they think they're all going to overstay their visa and whatnot. So. So there's a lot that's been going on, but these visits, I think, are really, it's the best thing about the partnership, just being able to go and see a whole different culture and learn a whole, the history, and just experience the vibrant, just the vibrancy of a place like Winneba, and then for them to be able to come and visit here as well. So, and create those relationships, and it's really powerful, and it is life-changing in many ways.
It is. And I would like to see an exchange student program. I think I talked to you about that, about having the students come over here and do Charlottesville City Schools for a little while. But briefly tell people how they can get involved, where they can donate money, when you plan to service again and have meetings to talk about the next trip, and if the trip don't happen.
Right. Yeah, we had a trip planned for this May 2020, and unfortunately with COVID, it got delayed. We were going to try to do it in August, but Ghana right now is not accepting foreign visitors because of the virus, and so we're going to try to go at the end of December. Winneba has 2 major annual festivals every year. One at the end, on January 1st, on New Year's Day, and then the other one is the first Saturday in May. So we try to schedule these trips around these festivals because it's a lot of fun to be there during festival time. And so we're going to try to go at the end of December. We'll see with the virus if that's going to even be possible. But definitely we'll try to go again first week of May next year. If people want to learn more about it, it's you can just Google Charlottesville Winneba. You'll find our website. It's WINNEBA. It's got information up there. Clarence Green, who's a local filmmaker, did a really sweet little 2-minute video, which is posted on our website for people to learn. He came on the 2018 trip with us and took a lot of good footage. So he created this little video so people can see what this experience is like. And I just think it's just a great partnership that we've created, and I feel honored to be part of it. So.
Me too.
Yeah.
And how we get money?
how we get money.
How do we do? How would?
Yeah,
how
so
would
on
we,
the website you'll see a link to donate to Charlottesville Winneba Fund. We have a PayPal. People want to donate. It's tax deductible. It's a 501c3, so you can write it off your taxes. And again, all those funds help to make these trips more affordable and help to pay for things like shipping medical supplies. That's not cheap to ship things overseas. So, but it's all for a good cause and really is impacting people's lives. So.
And you can party all day in Winneba. You left that part out. You can party over there, and they got Hennessy.
Right. That's the important part.
That's the important. They got any kind of liquor you want over there. No, but thank you, Dave. That was dope. I appreciate you coming through and
pleasure.
Being my first guest on my podcast. Again, it might be a part 2.
All right.
So
Anytime.
I think you're gonna be my floodgate to make more people want to do it. Seriously.
Well, I encourage people that she may seem like a bulldog, but she's a sweetheart underneath. So.
I'm a Yorkie. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Tanesha.
Here we go again.
Thanks, boo.